Transferring wealth successfully starts with asking yourself questions that will give your family a better life now and for generations to come. In this podcast, financial experts John and Michael Parise from Copper Beech Financial Group guide you through eye-opening questions to help you discover the truth about your wealth. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to The Truth About Wealth with John and Michael Parise of Copper Beech Financial Group. I'm Wendy McConnell. Hey guys, how you doing?
Hello, Wendy.
I'm good, Wendy. How are you?
Good. You guys are looking very dapper, very distinguished.
Oh, please.
We're trying. It's our inaugural video podcast here, so they had to think about my wardrobe a lot more than in prior episodes, I guess.
That's right. You can't just put your hair up in a ponytail like
Right.
I do, right?
Yep.
Oh, I had one of those way back when.
I am not surprised in the least, John. So today we are going to be talking about a little bit of a kind of reintroduction of Copper Beech and the addition of Michael and how things have come along. And let's get started.
Yeah, I'll kind of kick it off. It's been a great adventure with working with Michael. When he first joined me in 2009, it kind of changed the direction that I wanted to take Copper Beech, and Michael's been an absolute gem to work with. And I'll let him talk about his excitement joining his dad, because that was always a question mark. Does he go work for a law firm before he comes work with me, or he comes and works with me and not worry about working with law firms? So we went back and forth and help from a couple of attorneys that I work with. Said, hey, Michael, go work with your dad. He'll teach you a lot more very quickly, and he'll pay you more, which was all true. So Michael started in 2009, and I guess I give you a little bit of starting point how I created Copper Beech. Copper Beech was really a vision I had probably 30 years ago. I remember speaking to my peer group on the next paradigm shift in our industry, and I thought the assets under management model was a good model for the day. And that model is really just you work with a family, you manage their portfolios for an objective, and works great. It's a great model. But I was trained on the planning side. So I go back to the mid-'80s, and I was educated and trained on the financial planning industry. Now, that was a buzzword back in the 80s. A lot of people don't realize that was kind of new in that time frame. But I was fascinated with the approach, because I thought the business model should be, how do I educate the families to think differently about their plans? And you don't know what you don't know, which is one of my favorite expressions, because a lot of families that we work with really don't know what questions to ask. So we ask the questions, and we open up the gate of information to them. And it's amazing. They all of a sudden start changing their objectives when they get a different view of how they might want to build their plans. So that was the original vision that I had. The second component was, as I started to work with families, I realized that there was a subtle weakness. They had great advisors, and they gave great advice, and I refer to them as in silos. The attorneys worked in their tax world or planning world on the estate side. The CPAs did all the tax work. Financial advisors did the management of the assets. And you had property casualty brokers, bankers. You had all these people involved with these families. Now, I'll back up. Most of my approach was working with business owners, and they're a whole lot more complex to my view than an average family. So you need expertise in all those areas. And I realized that although all these advisors were very, very good at what they did for the families, they never talked to each other. And the collaboration was weak along the way, and I couldn't figure out why that was the issue. Because the client would say to me, well, my advisor told me to do this, and when we looked at it, it had a lot of negative and some positive impact when they made that decision. But no one took that client through the pros and cons of that decision. So the clients would say to me, well, can you do that for me, John? Can you read my wills and trusts? Can you read my buy-sell agreement? Can you look at the way we're structuring our portfolios? And I said, of course. But I often say, well, how do you work with your advisors? Well, I get a call from my investment advisor, once, twice a year, and he does a great job. I don't see my attorney because only if I need something, he doesn't call me. I have to be the one to call him if I need something. Now my CPA I see routinely once a year or twice a year to do some tax work, but that's my relationship. And I went, okay. So if I was going to be a quarterback, and I was going to look at all these advisors, and obviously we understand what they do, is that something you're looking for? So they said, perfect. I want a gatekeeper. I want someone to help me through understanding what I've put in place for my family, because if it has negative impact, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I want to make sure I know the pros and cons. So it started to click in me that I need to build a practice that not only had a collaborative side to it, but also had to be knowledgeable in those areas. So my training through the years has been all the above, from understanding tax exposures to estate planning, business succession issues, charitable structures, property and casualty risk. We had to understand all that. So I built my practice around understanding those components and be able to be that gatekeeper. And the analogy I like to use is we're the architects and everybody else is subcontractors. I think clients get that. Not that they're lesser than we are, but the client needs that gatekeeper to keep that family focused. And that's what I built the practice. And I got a lot of success and feedback from our family saying, you're exactly what I'm looking for. So we refer to our practice as a family CFO, if that makes sense to you. And some people refer to it as a family office. That's a word that confuses people, but we like to use a family CFO. And we always thought that made a lot of sense. I don't know if Michael, you want to jump in here?
Well, I think the family CFO term is one that we've gone back and forth with over the years in terms of what do we call ourselves, because I was just on a call yesterday with a new potential client, and I was giving him that story, and he said, "Oh, you're a family office, and so you mostly invest money." I said, "Well, no, we have very good managers that we can bring in if that's a need, but we're more beyond that." And so that family CFO moniker, he understood, I think, more so than the family office, and that was one thing, getting back to when I started in this industry, and even today, the family office term is very fragmented. I mean, it means a lot of different things depending on the type of business that you want to run as an advisor. So we kind of came up with this, again, that family CFO term to be able to help differentiate ourselves from the family office that's mainly focusing on investment and investing capital for a family.
Right.
And oftentimes that's a post-liquidity event from a sale of a business. And as you talked about, you've always worked with business owners and strategizing with that business owner while they're running the company, not so much just, okay, you sold your business, you made a boatload of money, let's figure out how to invest that money most to generate returns, or how to do that tax efficiently. That's all important, but we I think take a little bit of an earlier step in that in the process.
Yeah, if you look at the concept, and I might just stretch you a little bit, Wendy, we create 100-year families. So when families hire us, we work with G1 to G3, because we think when you connect all those dots, you preserve wealth. There's a proverb that we often talk about. It refers to every third generation families of wealth lose money. It's called shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves every third generation. Now, that's a study that's done across the world. So it's not just here in the United States. It's around the world. Wealthy families have a tendency to lose their wealth every third generation. You have to ask, well, why is that? Well, because if you look at G1 that created the wealth and the values that drove that wealth, by the time it gets to G3, things change a little bit. Like if I asked you a question, what do you remember about your great-great-grandfather? I get blank stares. I don't remember anything about the generational history of my family. So we try to build that with our family. So we create that 100-year connection between G1, G2, and G3, not only from the plan, but from an education standpoint. Because Michael will tell you, we get feedback from our families all the time that I want my kids to understand the wealth that we created, but I don't want them to be spoiled. I want them to be trust babies, and there's a big fear. So part of Copper Beech's model is not only do we build this plan, this 100-year family plan, we also educate the kids on the value of money and how mom and dad created that wealth. Matter of fact, we do videotapes of G1 and sometimes even further back on grandma, grandpa, on how they founded the company, how they fell in love, what struggles did they have when they were growing up? How did they raise their kids and run the business at the same time? So we go back and we videotape families' histories, so the future generations could look at the values and understand. Grandma and grandpa were pretty cool folks. They really put a lot of effort into building this wealth, so that we get to understand it. So it might listen. You can't guarantee anything in future generations that they'll get it, but we make a best effort to try to teach and develop a philosophy and a culture in the family to share those values. And it's a great track. Sometimes we struggle with it. We often kid our families, but we're often psychiatrists and psychologists.
Well, I think that just one area of how we work with a lot of our families, that videoing, we call it like a legacy video, is, I think, emblematic of the role that we take or strive to take with our families. That's different than perhaps some other advisors, in that, that again, we want to create 100-year families. And I learned this from you. You often say, okay, what advisor to the family, what advisor do you have on your team right now that if something happened to, let's say, the matriarch or patriarch, you would want to be able to guide your children and your spouse through that next phase financially? And very often, almost always,
we get blank
stares,
yeah.
Right? So we don't have, they don't have anybody in that role. So we want to be able to take that role. And that's the proactivity, like this particular topic of a legacy video. And I'm sure there are other advisors out there that maybe do this with their families, but very often CPAs are not doing that. Investment advisors might not be doing that. We think that's a really vital role and task to do with a family to prevent that shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves proverb. So we have a lot of different services that we can talk about and discuss, but that's, I think, a big one.
What I'm wondering is, if I could just ask a question,
Sure.
is you're saying that a lot of the money that you lose from generation 1 to generation 3 is because of a lack of appreciation, or taking it for granted, or not realizing the value of how the money was earned?
A lot of it has to do with that. There's a lot of, there are experts that are doing this all day, every day. And I think that the main two focal points, from my perspective and from everything that I've read, is a lack of communication between the generations, and then a lack of values that get transferred. And you can often say it's very natural, because generation 2 and generation 3 typically grow up in a very different environment than generation 1, right? In terms of generation 1, if you think about the entrepreneurial story, they started from nothing. They grew this very successful business. And so they have a different sort of, whether you want to call it work ethic or values-based system, that the next generations oftentimes don't have. And that's the adaptation that I think families have to go through in order to manage that effectively over time.
And the videotape, you think, helps?
Sure
it does.
Up?
Yep.
Even though the environments are still different?
Exactly. So the videos, and there's a whole process we might go through with a family to say, okay, these are the types of questions we think you should we should ask you in this interview, that you maybe want your grandchildren or your great grandchildren someday to be able to see. And it's a back and forth. They have topics they want to talk about that might spin off of some of our questions. So it's a back and forth. But yes, that's the main purpose, is to really be able to express, again, to your point, that what do you remember about your great grandfather or great grandmother? Unless you have and tell those stories, it's difficult to really know that and really understand where this financial capital came from over the last 100 years, sometimes, for some of these families that we work with. So
Got it.
Yeah, and they're a lot of fun. They're a hoot. Some of the stories are fantastic when we talk to families, but you get a sense of who they are. There was a cowboy in Utah years ago when I worked with this family, that his name was Jake, and we sat around the conference room, and Jake put all these wonderful trusts together. He looked at the team around the table, it was his attorneys, and it was our team, and he said, all right, I get this. I put all this money in this trust. How do I know my grandkids are going to appreciate what I built? So a great question. So he decided to do back then it was videos. He did a video, hired a company out of Hollywood, production company. It was magnificently done. You cry your eyes out when you watch this because it was a whole story about Jake and his wife. By the way, they were in their 90s. And the last scene was a horse riding into the sunset with them on back of the horse, playing the theme song of what's it? Titanic. That was their favorite song. And you cry your eyes out. But that was his way. And his trust said, no beneficiary of this trust is allowed to take any assets out until they watch this video, CD, or whatever technology is going to be somewhere down the road. But I thought it was a fascinating approach. That was my first understanding how important that piece could be in the process of generational wealth transfers. So we've adopted that in our practice. Let me go back and talk about how we approach our processes. Before we take a client on, we think it's very important that we audit, and I know it's a nasty word, but we want to review the current plan they have in place. So Michael and his team, we look at tax returns, financial statements, how they own assets, and we kind of look at their world, and we build this probably 100-page report, Michael,
Sometimes,
basically,
yeah.
that outlines 7 key areas. And those areas focus on, obviously, the wealth of the family and tax exposures and estate exposures. So what happens is through that process, the client understands how we think, we understand how the client thinks, but it also allows us to see if we can work together, because not everyone fits our profile. Not everyone wants the type of family office / family CFO role that we develop, and that's okay. We can't work with everybody. So that first step is the discovery for both parties to see if we could all work together. And once they say, "Oh, John and Michael, this is great. You opened my eyes to a lot of the weaknesses I have in our planning as a family. What's our next step?" And I say, not so fast. You need to talk to 3 of our families that we've had with us over more than 10 years to get more clarity on how we work with their advisor teams, how we work with the families, how we work with the kids, how we set up our structures, how we process our recommendations through the family. Only then will you see the impact we've had, because I could tell you all day long as a client how good we are at what we do in a certain way. But until you hear from a family saying, "Listen, I've been working with Copper Beech for many years, and this is why we enjoy employing them over the course of time." So that's a good process. And once we get that process completed, and they say, "Okay, talk to 3 of your families. It's great. Let's move forward." We work on a fee arrangement going forward. It's more of a consultative approach. It's not selling any products. It's more advice, because remember, you don't know what you don't know. We're teachers first. And that's important because we teach people to think differently about their financial affairs. That's our approach. I know that was a lot in one sentence, but that's our philosophy. And again, as I said, this is the next paradigm shift we see in the financial service industry, that they need to be more proactive and more deep in how they help a family. Because managing portfolios, all that's great. I think clients are asking for more. Well, I need more. I need more, because the world is very complex today, as you could imagine, as you already know. A lot of moving parts, is moving quickly. People are concerned about a lot of issues financially. So the more advice that you can give them, better. And everybody needs a coach. Everyone thinks they could do it by themselves, and they could go so far with it. And I don't disagree with that. But I think everyone needs to look back and say, "Wait a minute, do I need someone to guide me? Because the wealth is greater than I thought it was going to be, and I can't afford to risk what I've built." And that's the strategy. Michael, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I to echo your point about we're not always the best fit for every family. Not every family wants this level of engagement with an advisor. And again, that psychologist mantra we often talk about is, I think, very relevant, because everything is custom. Every family is different. Every family has different needs and desires, different stages of their business world or life. Although I said we do work with a lot of business owners while they are running their businesses, a lot of them have exited and now they have different needs. And so I've often had conversations with people that try to really sum up what it is that we do with families. And sometimes it's difficult because we're doing a lot of different things depending on the family. Some families are more focused on investments. Some are focused more on tax management. Some are focused on family meetings and legacy and creating that legacy video. So it is, that's not for everybody, I guess is my point. Not everybody wants that.
Yeah, it's not always about money. And I'll give you a personal story. If you listen to our first podcast 100 years ago, I tell a story about how I got into this business, and it was driven by a personal event in my family. I lost three parents before I was 30. My real dad died when I was six, I think, 5 or 6. And along the way, my mother raised all four of us. She had four of us in 25 months. Now, Wendy, let me back up and tell you exactly. It, my older brother's 10 months older. My twin and I were twins, premature, and my sister was 10 months younger. So not only did I lose my father when we were all very young, my mother had to raise us all by herself. Now you have to go back to that time frame. And she was a superstar. She was not not a typical housewife at that time. She was a registered nurse. She was an OR specialist. She was brilliant, but she still had the stress of raising four kids, and we
Sure.
weren't easy. No, we were not easy.
I'm
Kids were kids.
sure.
We were we were good kids. But we were not easy. So along the way, as we were growing up, my mom has said did a great job. She remarried my stepdad, who was a super guy. And along the way, she had my younger brother when she was 44 years old. So he was being raised by my mom. We were off to college at that time. They both came down with cancer and died 8 months apart from each other. And along the way, my mother changed her wills, and she made my sister and I executrix of her will. Now, I was not working in this business at the time. I was working for AT&T at the time, and I knew nothing about financial planning, knew nothing about wills, trusts. I just said, okay, it looks like a good way to do it. Well, one of my mom's sick days before she passed, she said to my sister, don't sell this house for less than this amount of money. And I said, Mom, you got it. So they passed, and we had to probate the estate. And people maybe don't understand what probate is. It's a fiduciary obligation of the powers to be in these documents to manage, pay off the debts of the family, distribute assets to all beneficiaries on an equal basis, or at least with the
However the will says it. Yeah.
And so along the way, again, when we tried to sell the house, my sister said, Mom said not to sell it for less than this amount of money. I said, but sis, we can't get that because it's not the marketplace. And we have a mortgage. There was no life insurance in the family. Again, there were school teachers and nurses. She was teaching nursing at that time. And we got stuck in this battle. We need to sell this property because there's a mortgage on it. And she said, I'm not signing anything until we get X amount of dollars for the property. She sued me, sued the estate. And 3 years later, we end up losing everything to the attorneys, got zero out of my mom and dad's estate, and I lost my sister for 27 years.
Wow.
Now, it wasn't about a dollar. It was about Mom said. So one of the things we focus on in families is not just the money, it's understanding the money and where it's supposed to go, how it's going to get there, and everybody needs to be informed so there's no battles after Mom and Dad die. So I swore when I got into this business, I was never going to let any family I work with go through that story. And it's hard. Sometimes it's hard, but that was my story. And that's what drives me in this business, to be committed to doing it right for the families we work with. And that's
well, I just wanted to add to that because obviously I grew up knowing this story, and when I got a certain age and you told me the full story. But I think to your point, now you fast forward to what we do at Copper Beech, and you're right, it's not all about money, but when you do have families with a lot of financial capital and a lot of complexity, I mean, as you pointed out, your mother and stepfather were school teachers. They didn't have significant financial capital. So now you add those family dynamics on, and then you have the complexity.
Welcome to our world.
that can cause additional issues that need to be managed. I mean, I think that actually, because we need to do our family meeting soon. But one of the things that
you're late, Michael. You're supposed to get that coordinated. See, I got him.
I'm busy here. There's things going on. But one of the things that we're probably going to talk about, or I've already started talking about, is, and we talk a lot of families about this, is family vacation homes. What happens with those? I mean, we have a house down in Ocean City, New Jersey, that we love going to. What do we do with that home if you and Mom are no longer here? And a lot of families have issues with that. And that's just one area that, you can talk about the financial issues along and around that. But just let's say the family wants to keep it. We have one family I can think of where the generation one wants the family to keep this property. Well, that's, they come from a very good place in wanting that, but do the kids want to do that? Who's going to maintain the property? Where are they going to live relative to the property? They hire a management company. They do it themselves. How do they divvy up the usage of the property? There's a lot more that goes into that sort of decision other than just, well, I want the family to keep it, right? So that's great that they want to keep it. I think in that case, everyone in the family generationally is on board with that. But, those sorts of conversations, we want to try to be the, like you said, the coach or the mentor, the group that the family goes to say, this came up, how do we deal with this? And that's just maybe one topic that we would add to a family.
Yeah, that's
meeting.
the psychology part of what we do. Because it is. I mean, money's emotional, and it's just not the dollar itself. It's all the components of moving that dollar, protecting that dollar, understanding that dollar when you look at the generations. And that's what we call it, the backstage of what we do. The front stage is building the model, building the structure of the family. Again, that architect. And the backstage is managing what we built for the families. Like, we have a conference every year for our families. We invite them all in. And this year, for the first time, we're doing G2 as part of that conference because they're getting older now. So now we're doing G1 and carving out an afternoon for G2 to start introducing G2 to what mom and dad built strategically. Like, people don't understand how trusts work. And that's a big topic when you look at trust. They think they're bad documents or they're bad boxes to put money in. No, they're very powerful tools to guide, manage, and develop structure around a family to protect that wealth from all we call them in-laws and outlaws. And it's really just the structure of how you protect wealth. It's asset protection is the theme that we use. So all these components, we're trying to teach the kids why mom and dad, what they put in place was fabulous. And it's not a negative issue. It's understanding what they did, why they did it, and how they did it, and the impact it has in your life. So when you look at all that, I know this is a lot, but that's why when I look back at my career, this is 38 years of developing this philosophy and this culture. And it's not easy to present that culture to families that are not used to that. That's why they get often surprised. And we often get comments like, I didn't know an organization like you guys were around. If I would have known you guys around, I would have called you 10 years ago. Well, we weren't not known 10 years ago. And we're a small operation. We're not a big company. So it's hard for the world to understand who we are. That's why we do podcasts and now videos, is because we might get the message out. There are better ways to be able to manage your wealth. And our recommendations always to families is to push back at your advisors. If you get the messaging today, you need that team approach with your advisor community. Go back to them and say, listen, things are moving fast. I don't understand it. The world's very complex. There's more information out there than I know to deal with. I didn't understand half of it. I need a coach. I need someone to counsel me to do that. I think that's the next shift. Although, as I said earlier, a lot of families think they could do it themselves because they read something. I'm going to push back at that. I don't think that's necessarily going forward the right approach to managing wealth successfully. That's just my take, and I would just let all listeners know: just push back, be proactive. It's your money, not theirs.
And the
so
information
push back
is
and
always changing.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
and push back at it, and don't be. I often say that our industry got very lazy. We've had a 14-year bull market. People have grown their wealth if you were fortunate to be in the stock market over the last 14 years. Real estate's gone up, although inflation is a key factor. We won't get into the nitty-gritty here. But all those pieces have to be understood on what actually is occurring behind the scenes. If you don't have a coach or someone helping you at least view that, it's hard to pick that up just reading something. I don't know, Mike, you have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, I would agree. It's to your point, Wendy. Things are changing all the time in the tax laws, and we've had quite a few podcasts on the pending sunset of some of the tax laws that are, as we're recording this, it's going to be in another probably 18 months or so. And so those are things that if you don't have a proactive advisor that you're working with on a regular basis, the family's unfortunately really going to be responsible for making sure that they're the ones being the catalyst to have those conversations. And, they're usually running businesses and doing family things, and so they don't always have the time to do that. And that's where, again, we try to fill that niche and be that proactive advisor.
And I'll close with this. It's been a pleasure working with my son for 15 years. Not every dad has an opportunity to do that, but he's caught on to the culture, my vision. He understands it. And that was doubtful for me as a dad. I wasn't sure if he was going to like the industry, like working with me, although I'm a nice guy. But anyway, I don't know if he was going to like to work with me, but it turned out to be a great adventure for both of us. And we've been together 15 years. Never really had any fight about anything but politics. But that's another conversation for another show.
It's very rampant in today's families.
Yes.
And he's I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
and he's my succession. A lot of folks ask me, I'm obviously a little older than Michael, is what happens to you? What happens to the business? I've got Michael and a whole team behind him, and we're building that out as a strategy. And we're recruiting talent now to build out G3 of Copper Beech potentially. So because we made a promise to our families, we're going to be here 20, 30 years from now to work with your kids and grandkids. And that's what we're building here at Copper Beech.
Great. Well, I have to say, as somebody who was not with you on your first podcast and all through, I feel like I know you and what you do so much better. So thank you for taking the time to explain. We appreciate it. And I agree. You are delightful, John. I think you're fabulous.
See,
yeah,
I
told
you, Mike.
You give him that much credit.
Michael, how do people get in touch with you if they want to ask some questions?
Sure. Well, you can reach us on LinkedIn and social media. You can give us a call on our office, area code 856-988-8300. Or our website is www.cbfgllc.com.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you both, guys. Thank you for letting us see you. It's very exciting.
Yeah, this is kind of new. This is great. Yeah. This is fun. Yeah.
Good job. Good job. All right. And thank you for listening today. Please like, follow, and share this podcast with your friends. Until next time, I'm Wendy McConnell.
Thank you for listening to the Truth About Wealth podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guest and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Copper Beech Financial Group. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional investing advice. Always seek the advice of your financial advisor or other qualified financial service provider with any questions you may have regarding your investment planning.
This material is for informational purposes only. Neither APFS nor its representatives provide tax, legal, or accounting advice. Please consult your own tax, legal, or accounting professional before making any decisions. Copper Beech is not affiliated with American Portfolios Financial Services, Inc. and American Portfolios Advisors, Inc. Securities offered through American Portfolio Financial Services, Inc., a member of FINRA SIPC, investment advisory and financial planning services offered through American Portfolio Advisors, Inc., an SCC registered investment advisor. These opinions are subject to change at any time without notice. Any comments or postings are provided for informational purposes only and do not constitute an offer or a recommendation to buy or sell securities or other financial instruments. Readers should conduct their own review and exercise judgment prior to investing. Investments are not guaranteed, involve risk, and may result in a loss of principal. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Investments are not suitable for all types of investors. Copper Beech is an unaffiliated entity of American Portfolios Financial Services, Inc. and American Portfolios Advisors, Inc. Any opinion expressed in this forum is not the opinions of American Portfolio Financial Services, Inc. and American Portfolio Advisors, Inc., and have not been reviewed by the firm for completeness or accuracy. American Portfolios and Copper Beech Financial Group are not affiliated with any other named business entities mentioned.